I hope you can hear me clearly. Alhamdulillah. All right. Okay. All right. Alhamdulillah. Brilliant. Right. So inshallah, let's start. نحمد ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي شرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. All right, so we did an intro in the last class and we talked about two main aspects. We talked about shahwat and we talked about shubhat. And we did a little bit of linguistic breakdown as well. Inshallah, today we'll sort of dig in properly into the understanding of different levels and different degrees, darajat of fasting. I'm going to be basically taking some material from a book which was written by Ibn Qudamaah. His name is Ibn al-Qudamaah, and the book is called Al-Maqdisi. Okay, Al-Maqdisi. And I'm also going to be covering a little bit from Imam al-Ghazali's Ihya al-Ulum and the chapter of fasting, the essence of fasting. So inshallah, but one of the things that I wanted to begin with, and it's something that I really want to read out to you, quote unquote, and inshallah we can take it from there, is really when Ibn Qudamaah talks about the typical fasting, and he doesn't really dig into the concept of fasting because that is understood. It's common language. That's But in this particular section of Maqdisi, he talks about not everyone is fasting at the same level. If you've been a part of the Salah class, you know that we talked about this, that people who pray, not every person who is praying and who's in the act of Salah is at one level. Different people are praying at different level, therefore their darajat and their final ajr is also different. Similarly, in this ibadah as well, different people who are fasting are all at different levels of fasting, and therefore their ajr is completely different. We don't know the ajr of fasting because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kept that a secret, and he says, I will give them jaza. Asomuli, we talked about this hadith last time. Asomuli, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Siyam is for me, fasting is for me, wa ajzi bi, and I'm going to give the jaza for it. So again, the befitting jaza, as which is appropriate for the person who's fasting. So, which is a very interesting concept, because if you look at it on the zahir, this is an ibadah that all Muslims around the world, wherever they may be in the hottest part of the world, they may be in like the coolest part of the world, they may be anywhere in the world. But as Ramadan touchdowns, everyone, it becomes obligatory for everyone to fast this month. They can have different hours, they can have different length of their fasting period, but everyone fasts. So really on the zahir, if you just look around people within your community, everyone's fasting really, but who knows who's at what level. And this is so personal because sometimes you yourself don't know what's your level of fasting, right? So it's a very interesting concept that they talk about, because they're really going in and into the spiritual element, into the inner dimensions of the ibadah, which I think is incredibly important. And this is something that as I studied on, and as I increased the depth of my knowledge, being a student of knowledge, this was something that I learned, and it took me time to understand that, because the thing is, we're sometimes so consumed by the zahir of the ibadat, we neglect the inner self, we neglect the internal aspect of the ibadat. We understand the sujood of the zahir, and we're so particular about, the 7 points should touch the floor, and the nose should be this, and the angle of the arms should be like this. Not that that's not important, that is important, but there's an inner dimension to it, which is far more important in our deen, which is sometimes where we neglect. we talk a lot about the zahir of a person. We talk about, the zahir of things, the zahir of ibadat, but we seldom talk about the state of our heart when we're doing that ibadah, where we forget that actually what's more important is the internal aspect when we are in the state of ibadah. And that is why this is something that he talks about at great length in terms of fasting. So he talks about any fasting person. He says anyone who's fasting is fasting at 3 specific levels. He says the fasting of a person who fasts, there are 3 basic types of fasts. So one, he doesn't give specific terminologies to them. He just says there's a general fast, and then there's a specific fast, and then there is the special, the muqtataseen, the people who are special, they fast. Those are the special fasts. So this is something that what he does initially, he just divides all people who are fasting into 3 levels. Then he says that the level 1, like the first one, the general level, he says, and that is, he says, the majority of the Muslims across the world, majority of the Muslims fall into the group 1 category. And these are people who just restrain themselves from food and drink and from sexual passion. So general people are the general people who are fasting, and they restrain themselves from food and drink, and they restrain themselves from the sexual relationship with their spouse. If you remember, we discussed this in the last class. We talked about the shahawat and the shubahat, and we talked about the animalistic appetite. So these are people who are fasting at that level. So they're not eating. And by when I'm saying they're not eating and they're not engaging in sexual intercourse, I don't mean that they're not fasting. They're not praying. I'm not talking about that. I'm having understood that all the other elements are there. They're particular about the hijab. They're particular about their salah. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the level of fasting that they're doing. So when they are in the ibadah of fasting, what is different? What's different is they're not eating, they're not drinking, and they refrain from any kind of sexual appetite during the times of fasting, which is the general. He says that's what 90% of the people are doing. So this, he says, is the lowest type of fast. This is the lowest type of fast. Okay. Again, he's talking in terms of the inner dimensions. He's talking about the degrees of fasting. He's talking about the levels of fasting. And level 1, which is the general specific siyam, he says that is the lowest level of fast because you're only staying away from food and drink and sexual appetite. Then we move on to the specific fast. This is number 2, the one in the middle. Number 2, he says this is specific fasting. This is the fast of a few selected Muslims. So the first one was a more general, majority of the people are doing it. Then he says the second one is the specific fast. That is the fast of few selected Muslims. And he says in this fasting, they refrain from sins of the hands, the tongue, the feet, the sight, and other parts of the body. So when I say they refrain from the tongue, the hands, the feet, the sight, and other parts of the body, they're particular about, okay, it's not just my fasting in terms of filling up my stomach and the shahawat of the sexual intercourse, but it is the fasting of my eyes also. My eyes will not see anything that Allah does not want me to see, which is haram. My ears will not hear anything which is haram. Just like food and drink becomes haram upon me in those times when I'm fasting, similarly, it's not just food and drink, because we talked about this last time. It is the shahawat, and they're fed in by all of these faculties. It's not just food going in and that's feeding your appetite. It's also the sound and the visuals. Everything is feeding your nafs. So he says that the hands and the tongue and the feet and the sight and other body parts, they are also in a state of fasting. So he refrains himself from any kind of sin whatsoever. So that, he says, few people fast. Again, can you see it narrows it down as we move along. The third type of fast, he says, which is the special people, the more specific, the very, very few people, the specific ikhtisas, the very special people to Allah, they fast like this. And this is the fast of the highest class. This is the fast of the highest class. These are people who kept their fast and they kept it consciously. This is very interesting. He says these are people who kept their fast, and they fasted consciously. They fasted with awareness, with the intention of, and then he brings that ayah in, kutiba alaykum as-siyam kama kutiba ala allazina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. He says they fasted with the intent that la'allakum tattaqun is their goal. Their goal is so that they adopt taqwa, so that they increase in taqwa. And he says these are the third type of people. They're fasting consciously. They're fasting with their mind. They're fully aware with fasting, and they have a goal. They have a goal when they're fasting. So subhanallah, and he says this is the highest rank of people when they're fasting. So again, this is very interesting that he talks about this. And now I'm just going to go, because once he talks about this, he starts talking about ihsan in fasting, because that is what he's doing in order to explain the special type of fasting, because he doesn't explain that more, but he goes into another sub chapter and he explains ihsan in fasting, okay, which is also part of how you can do number 3. Okay, they're fasting consciously, they're fasting with focus. Their focus and their goal is increasing their taqwa. How do you do that? You bring ihsan in your fasting. This is what he talks about. Now these are the 6 points that he mentions, and we're going to go over them very quickly, because in detail I'm going to go into the overall aspect of special fasting, which is the 3rd degree, inshallah. So quickly, fasting with ihsan, which is how you do number 3. So he talks about fasting with ihsan, which very few people are doing. He says to begin with, it is to restrain the eyesight, to control. It's fasting of the basar, the fasting of your, the eyes fast, from anything which is evil, anything that will divert your attention from dhikr, anything that takes you away from Allah's remembrance, anything that takes you away from hidayah, anything that takes you off track. You don't even put your eye towards it, because he says eyesight is like a poisonous arrow out of the arrows. So out of the arrows of the devil. It's very interesting. Eyesight is a poisonous arrow out of the arrows of the devil. And he says if a man controls it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him such iman, which is like, which is the lazza of the iman. So again, to be able to control your eyesight and where the eyesight falls, it requires immense amount of training and consciousness, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And especially now with the media, with the billboards, with magazines everywhere, social media everywhere, there's just this outburst of so much visual stimulation which is there, and our eyes are, they're surrounded by all of this. It's all around us. And again, the rule is when it gets tough, the tougher get going, right? When things are going to get tough, the ajr becomes more. So we're living in a time where, the ajr is it's like gold. It's being distributed because the situation is such. It's become that much tough. So even when you're scrolling down, you come across some things that you shouldn't be seeing. Just block that particular. Don't have that on your feed. So you have to be very conscious of what you have, what are you going to scroll up and down, and again, how you react to those things. Number 2, to restrain the tongue. When restraining the tongue, he basically talks about restraining the tongue in terms of any kind of useless, idle talk, which could be false or backbiting. It could be slander, abusive, words of curse, obscenity, hypocrisy, enmity. All these words come in. So I'll just repeat them one more time. He says when you're talking about fasting from the tongue, any kind of speech, any words that are useless, they're idle, they're false, backbiting, slander, abusive speech, obscenity, any kind of cursive words, hypocrisy, enmity, all of this is included. So you have to really, it's like a fast of the tongue as well. You have to be very careful. Then he talks about the preference of adopting silence is much more worthy. So he says either keep silent Or the best thing that you do with your tongue is that you remember Allah or you recite Quran. So if you're not going to remember Allah, do dhikr or recite Quran, better to be silent. If you're not doing anything khair with it, better to keep quiet. Again, with speech nowadays, writing a comment on social media, making a comment, or pressing the like button, or showing your approval towards something, it's so much more important where you are putting your words, because even though you may not be orally saying it, but you're putting your words across, it's going to have an impact. So that is even more important, because it's, once it's out there, it's recorded, it's written down. So be very, very careful of number 2 as well, because that is fasting of the tongue. Then he goes on to number 3, which is fasting of the ears, to restrain the ears. Fasting of the ears, and this is the level of ihsan, and we're still in number 3, by the way. He says fasting of the ears, to restrain the ear from hearing the evil talks, because what is unlawful to utter is also unlawful to hear. Which is a very interesting concept, which is haram to say out of your mouth is also haram to hear. Sometimes there may be certain dialogues or certain words, or sometimes there's just music out there, all kinds of nonsense is going on. So that which you wouldn't do, you shouldn't even listen to it, because either which way, it's going to go down into your system. It's going to go down through the faculty of hearing. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for that reason, has forbidden us that you don't even say anything wrong, and you don't hear such things, because they will affect us and they will affect our heart. So if you're and that's why, the Prophet said that if you're in a group with people, and the people are backbiting, and you're not doing it, you're just sitting there quietly, but just the fact that you're listening to that, you are a co-sharer in the sin. You are a co-share, you're sharing that sin, because you're part of that. You may not be uttering that out, but just the fact that you're part of that gathering and it is touching your ears, you're going to share the sin. Then number 4, he says to restrain the hands and the feet. This is again to for the hands and the feet and all the other organs of the body, to save them from any kind of evil. And this is interesting, because you don't touch anything which is haram. You don't walk towards anything haram. He gives a very interesting parable. He says that this is like a man who destroys a town for constructing a building. So it's destruction of a town for constructing a building. So if you are going to be fasting in Ramadan or any other time you're fasting, but with your hands you do something wrong, or with your feet you walk towards something wrong, so you're thinking that you're going to construct a nice building, but you're actually destroying a town doing it. So it's really not going to benefit you at all. So he who fasts does evil is like a patient who restrains himself from eating fruits for the fear of disease, but who swallows poison. It's very interesting. He gives us incredible parables. He who fasts and does evil is like a patient who restrains himself from eating fruits for the fear of disease, but he swallows poison. And then he says, a sin by the hand or the feet, or any other type, but he's putting it here, a sin is like eating poison. So he's actually the one who's drinking the poison, and he's such a fool. So it's, subhanAllah, it's interesting, the parable that he's given, that you are fasting, but you can't control your hands and your feet. So this is again, when you control that, you're rising the level of your fasting, and that's the ihsan, the level of ihsan. When I say ihsan, it's excellent fasting, because the word ihsan is excellence. So this is putting excellence in your fasting. This is beautiful fast, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. So you're going to do the same act that everybody around you is doing, but you get maximum out of it, because yours is considered beautiful in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the 5th one, he says, which is very interesting, excessive eating. And I'm going to go into a detail of all, I'm going to elaborate collectively all of them, inshallah, later, but I'm just doing it bullet point wise. The 5th one, he says, is excessive eating. And here he says that the food and the drink, which is halal, but, eating halal, but so much at the time of breaking the fast that it fills your belly, becomes such a wrong act. So eating halal, which is halal for you at the time of iftar, but eating so much that is completely full, full, your belly is full with it, is actually not a good act. It becomes blameworthy. And then he says a belly filled up with too much halal is hated more than all the other reservoirs. It's very interesting. So a fasting man eats and eats full at the time of breaking fast what he could not eat during all day. And he says this is another disease. It's the disease of the heart, which is called hirs. I want, I want, I want. So he's saying that all day you keep yourself vigilant and you're not eating. But at the time of iftar, you just completely let loose and you just have to fill your belly to the brim. That's a wrong type of fast. It's not going to make your fast excellent, even though it's the time you're breaking the fast, but you break it in a manner which is not Allah's not pleased with it. Which brings me to the point of, if you just see the way we fast, subhanallah, and the choice of foods that we eat. And this was something that I had intentionally done with myself and my family. Sat them down a couple of years ago, and I said, no matter however much I love the traditional foods that we eat and the culture that we have and all the fried stuff, we can't do this. And I intentionally did it with my boys, because a lot of times it's sometimes the demands of the men also, that please make this, and then the wives will make it. And then either they're in the kitchen most of the time, and it's the whole fasting is about cooking, and it's about feasting, not fasting. So it just deceives the whole purpose, really. And me and my husband, wanted to intentionally do this, so that the children then, by the time they're older, they're just used to that pattern. So this was something that, no fried food, no cola drinks, nothing from outside, no burgers, no this, no that. So you have to be very limited. It's just going to be one dish, it's just going to be one item, and that's all we're going to eat. And that worked really well, alhamdulillah. It makes you lose weight also, which is not your intention, but it happens because that's intentionally what you're trying to do, which brings me to the whole point that when you intentionally do these things, it will affect you physically as well. That's what happens, because otherwise we're eating and we're not realizing, we're not conscious about it. But when it comes to Ramadan, it's a month where we're supposed to be conscious about every little thing that we do. So excessive eating, in a point where you have to consciously make the right decisions and make the right choices. You're breaking the fast, and you break it with ihsan. The sixth point is mindfulness when it comes to, he says, bain al-khawfi wal raja, to be very focused of the fact that even the fact that you're fasting, your hope with Allah is, inshallah, Allah will accept my fast and it will be good and Allah will multiply my reward. But with the sense of fear as well, what if he doesn't? What if it's not good enough? So your relationship, when you fasted, your relationship with Allah, even at the time of fasting, has to be in a very conscious level. You have to be mindful of the fact that it could go either which way, it could be in any such situation. And then he says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, and he quotes Hassan al-Basri. He says Hassan al-Basri was passing through a group of men who were playing and they were sporting. So they were doing some kind of sporting game. And this was in the month of Ramadan. And he says, Allah made the month of Ramadan for running, in which people will be running for good deeds, competing, but people will be competing with each other for good deeds. So interestingly, that we find that a lot, that people are fasting and then they're busy with sports and they're busy with entertaining themselves. This is not the month where you entertain yourself. This is rather a month where you grow yourself spiritually. It's not more external, it is more internal. At least that is my understanding of Ramadan. Ramadan is really much more internal than it is external. So inshallah, having said that, I'm going to move on to, but I'm going to focus on the third level, the special level of fasting, where you're actually fasting with ahsan only. If you look at it, that all our ibadat, whether it's the salah, whether it's the wudu. The Prophet ﷺ said about even salah, he says it is a shield. It's a protection. About wudu as well, he said it is a shield. It is a protection. For fasting, the famous hadith of the Messenger ﷺ, "As-siyamu junnah." It is a junnah. It is a shield. And even zakah, it's a shield because it protects your wealth. So what we're doing is that we're creating through these gifts that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, through these ibadat that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us, a barrier between us and between those things that can harm us. They can potentially harm us, So the wealth, for example, can potentially harm us. But when we do zakah, when you give the zakah, we protect, it becomes a shield. So potentially those things can harm us, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these ibadat and they protect us and they become a barrier from those things that can possibly harm us. So obviously the greatest harm that one can bring upon themselves is the harm of sinning, and also fasting into ghafla, heedlessness. So the fasting, and let's focus on the ibadah of fasting, is actually a way of coming back to our true nature. This is how I have understood fasting over years, reading about it extensively. It's more internal, as I say, than external. People look at it in a completely different manner, and sometimes, and this is the sad part of even our communities, knowledgeable people, they get stuck with the external fiqh sometimes and they miss out on the internal aspect. So it's a fasting, for me, as I've understood it, really is a way of coming back to our true fitrah, of reminding ourselves who we truly are. And that's when the Messenger ﷺ said, "At-siyamu junnah," it is a shield. And then the hadith is very interesting. Actually, I should have the hadith here. Yeah, and this is the hadith that we should be doing in detail. If you see, it starts from here. As-siyamu junnah. The siyam is a shield. فَإِذَا كَانَ أَحَدُكُمْ صَائِمًا. And if one of you is in a state of fasting, one of you is fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ. Then that person should not behave. Actually, I'm just going to come to this hadith. Let me just do it bit by bit. The Messenger ﷺ said that as-siyamu junnah, fasting is a shield. And in that situation, if anybody is in a state of fasting, which is a protection for you, so when you're fasting, فَلَا يَرْفُثْ, do not behave in obscene manners. Do not behave in any kind of a lewd, obscene, filthy behavior, indecent behavior. Wala yajhal. And I'm going to focus a lot more today in this word, wala yajhal. And do not, yajhal from juhal, jahiliya, don't behave foolishly. And this is a very important point. We understand the word yarfas, don't do indecent acts, don't lose your haya, don't view things which are indecent. We understand that. But wala yajhal, don't behave foolishly. I'm going to get into that. And if anyone and if anyone argues with you or abuses you, just say inni sa'imun, I'm fasting. Okay, so basically, in other words, we're being disciplined by our Rabb in this incredible month. It's basically a month of discipline. It's a month of training. I'm not going to, and what I have understood with this fantastic hadith is, and these are the tips that the Messenger is saying. Fasting is a shield. When one of you is fasting, make sure that you stay away from any kind of lewdness or shameless, indecent behavior, and don't behave foolishly. All right, and so actually, I'm being trained by my Rabb, and I'm not going to allow someone to unsettle this state for mine. I'm supposed to be in a training state. I'm supposed to be in a focused state. I'm not going to allow anyone to take me away from that state. All I'm going to say is, you know what? I'm fasting. And that's it. So, how do I put it? There are these behavior patterns that people have. And ultimately, we live in this dunya, and majority of the people in this dunya, I could be wrong, but I think they're living on an autopilot. Okay, majority of the people are living like they're living in an autopilot. Okay, it's like they're sleepwalking, and they're walking through their existence. Um, and if something, they're just doing what they're doing, and they go on in a robotic, mechanical manner, day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out. That's just your life. You get up in the morning, you have your breakfast, you go to work, you come back from work, da, 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 da. It's just so mechanical. It's just, as I said, we're on autopilot, and we're just sleepwalking through the whole day. And if out of all of this, if someone says something and it disturbs my autopilot state, it's like somebody's pushed my button, and then I react. Then I lose that state, and I'm going to respond in a manner which I will then be regretful of. Why did I have to say that? So really, my understanding of this hadith is, when the Messenger Sallallahu is saying, don't let people push your buttons. Before anything, just say, Inni sa'imun. I'm fasting, I'm fasting. Do not let them push you to a point where you are going to react. And that's important, because we need to be in a state of awareness, and that's what fasting gives me. It gives me a consciousness, it gives me a higher level of focus, and then that understanding with focus, that I'm not going to engage in this game. I'm not going to engage in this kind of a behavior, because I am only going to react in a manner which may not be good enough for me. So that's what fasting is doing. It's bringing me to a higher level of awareness and a higher level of consciousness. Again, what we see around us, what we see around in the world, that people really, if you look around, are they are fasting. I'm not saying they're not, but externally, but the state is, subhanallah, it's a sleeping state. And if you see people who are like this on autopilot, they have certain behavior patterns, and you will see that there's certain things, certain buttons you press, and then rage, anger, they get upset, they get frustrated, they have anxiety issues, the mood is off. These are behavior patterns. So really, and these patterns are repeated again and again, and at times for an entire lifetime. Entire lifetime, people are stressed out about certain things, and they don't know how to change their behavior. Rather, they're going to continue in those behavior patterns, and it's really sad, but that's what is happening. And in this state, imagine if somebody's fasting, so with the same behavior patterns, it's actually problematic. It brings us to the hadith, that one of the narrations of Ali Radhiyallahu anhu, he had once said that annasun niyam, people are asleep. So I love that. People are asleep, It's subhanallah. And you see, Islam comes in and distinguishes, Islam comes in, it wakes us up. It disciplines our soul. Literally, it does. It wakes us up. It's like a wake-up call. That's what Islam is. And Ali Razallahu Anhu said, people are asleep. So when they die, suddenly they become awake and they become aware. It's very interesting. So when they die, they wake up. And the Messenger said, consider yourself already in the grave. So don't die before you actually die. Wake up. Wake up until death actually comes and gets you. So this is what Ramadan is all about. This is what I've understood Ramadan to be. It's about getting up and waking up. It's about ourselves. That's what we're doing in Taraweeh. That's what we're doing in Tahajjud. We're actually waking up, and we're forcing ourselves to be more focused and to be more conscious. When people, again, with meals, sometimes when people will eat a lot at iftar time, if you go to a party or if you go to an invitation, or sometimes even in your own house, you eat so much and then you start feeling sleepy, you feel lethargic. Ramadan is all about less food. It's not about more food. It's less food. It's not feasting, it's fasting. So we're following, and when we're behaving like this, we're actually following the people of the book. These are habits of the people of the book. The hadith says you will follow the people of the book, an-na'li bin na'al, like a shoe matches the other shoe. How is the Christmas and how is their religious whatever they do? If you look at their festive holidays, what are they doing? It's all about food. It's all about festivities. It's all about eating, and drinking and being merry. And we are not far from that. We've made Ramadan into a big feasting party. Subhanallah. Those are dishes that we don't cook otherwise, but we'll cook now. Whereas this is a month of eating less actually. Subhanallah. And that leads to more heartburn. That will lead physically to a point where you really cannot do what you're actually setting out to do in the first place. So we've just turned the whole thing around. The Messenger Sallallahu in a hadith said it's not enough, and listen to this hadith, it's very important. It is enough for Bani Adam. It is enough for Bani Adam to have luqmat. Luqmat are morsels of food, spoonfuls, or hand, just from the hand when you're eating. Luqmat, some morsels of food. It is enough for Bani Adam to have luqmat, small portions that keep his back straight. But if he has to, he should fill his stomach to about 1/3 of food, 1/3 of water, and 1/3 of breath. That is when you have to. The standard tariqa is that you should just eat luqmat, So I eat because I need to survive, which is a lot less than what we eat, subhanallah. And what we've done to our ibadat is combine them with this feasting, and it just completely miscalculates and takes us away from the whole focus of what we set out to do. Coming to this word, wala yajhal, I would like to elaborate on this word, wala yajhal. The word jahal, if you just focus on the word jahal, the word jahil everybody knows. The word jahil is the opposite of an alim. An alim is a person who knows. So a jahil is a person who's ignorant, who doesn't know. For the pre-Islamic Arabs, how are they using this word before Islam came? This is very interesting. So for the pre-Islamic Arabs, jahil or a jahil was someone, listen to this, jahil was someone who responded impulsively. Anytime when a person was insulted, he would react. This is what they called a jahil person. This is fascinating. And you see, this was the impulsive person. Anytime that person is irritated or insulted, that person immediately reacts. That for the pre-Islamic Arab was called a jahil. That was their understanding. The Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is saying, "Wala yajhal." Don't be reactionary. When you haven't eaten for too much time, then you're actually you're at the edge. Anything is going to irritate you. Anything is going to be able to push your buttons because you're on the edge. You haven't eaten. We say this to the children that, they're hungry. That is why they're reacting, and that is why they're getting cranky. The whole point of being cranky is that you have not fed your appetite. Your appetite is hungry. And the whole point of keeping your appetite hungry is not to make you cranky, but actually you're in training. You need to discipline the nafs. And you see, it's fascinating that the concept of jahiliyyah was subhanallah when you are very reactionary. But again, if you look at it that way, reactionary people, subhanallah, they make a vehicle of themselves. They make an issue of themselves, and it only ends in regret. It's just regretful behavior. I shouldn't have said this. I shouldn't have reacted in this manner. That should not have uttered out of my mouth. I'm so sorry. All of this occurs because we are reactionary. And wala yajhal, do not act foolishly. Do not react. The whole point is, again, as I said, Ramadan comes in to make us conscious, to make us wake up, especially when the appetitive nature is curbed. The beastly nature of us is locked up and curbed. We can't eat and we can't feed this appetite. Hence, we feed the spiritual spiritual being, spiritual self of us. This is how we increase in taqwa and consciousness, because increasing oneself in consciousness, that is what taqwa is, right? لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, don't forget that. So increase ourselves in conscious. So be aware of your eyes, be aware consciously of your tongue, be aware consciously of your ears, be aware consciously of your hands, your feet, your mindfulness, aware that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these extraordinary gifts of eyes and ears and tongue, and then challenged us to use them for what they were created for in the first place, not to use them in disobedience, not to use them only to satisfy the lust and the appetite or the shahwat or the not for that. This is the kind of structure and discipline we are doing for 1 month. We are in a 1 month very strict regime. We're in a 1 month very strict regime. It's training and it's structure and discipline. If you look at the lives of prehistoric Jahil people, for example, the Jahil who we are calling Jahil, another word very interestingly is the, as I said, the opposite of Jahil was Alim. Okay, the opposite of Jahil is Alim. But that meaning is what Islam came and gave, right? Because the Jahil is a person who's ignorant, and then the Alim is a person who does not react and who is knowledgeable. He doesn't react because of the knowledge that he has, right? He knows better, so he behaves better. Another word which is very interesting is that they had opposite of the word Jahil was Halim. The opposite of the word Jahil was Halim. Halim is someone who is forbearing, tolerating. Hilm is a quality of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is Al-Halim, is very tolerating, is very forbearing. So Hilm is the quality where you don't display impulsive, impetuous behavior. You control your behavior. You don't let, number one, anyone press your buttons, and even if they do, you do not become irrational. You're very controlled. I'll tell you a story. Once a Yemeni man came to Medina, and he had heard about the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he'd heard about his preaching and what he teaches. He heard some verses from the Quran as well. So he had come all the way, and he came to the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then he insulted him very badly. He said some very, very bad words. And the Prophet ﷺ, as his character, as his nature, did not respond. He did not react. He just walked away with great dignity, and he just walked away silently. The man came back and became a Muslim. And then was questioned, what was that all about? And then he says that, my father was a very learned rabbi. My father was a very learned rabbi. He was very well versed in his scriptures. He had left me with a description of the last prophet. And in the descriptions, I found all of them to be in the Prophet ﷺ. But I had to test him for his hilm. I had to test him for his hilm. Hilm is, again, as I said, tolerating, forbearing. And that is why I said those words. I just wanted to see how he would react. And the fact that he did not react, that was enough for me to believe in him. Subhanallah. So I, look at it. This was the hallmark of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is how they were following his sunnah. Today you find people who love the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they will do all kinds of things in the love of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and they'll say that they're following sunnah. They'll use the miswak, and they say they're following sunnah. They'll have their trousers up their ankles because they're following the sunnah, and they'll have different things. Again, the issue is everything is external. Everything is external. You see, when you're talking about following sunnah, the biggest following of his sunnah is adopting his character, adopting his ikhlaq, adopting his behavior patterns. Why are we so focused with the external sunnah? Why are we not looking at the internal aspect of the sunnah? You see, just by the miswak, the world didn't really change with the Prophet taking miswak did it. It did not draw people to Islam. His miswak didn't draw people to Islam. And I don't mean it in a bad way. I don't mean don't do the miswak. I'm saying what you need to do in terms of drawing people to Islam is the akhlaq, is the character, because it's very easy to take a miswak, but it's difficult to fix yourself. It's difficult to put yourself in that structure of the messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's difficult. So it's very easy externally to look like a sunnah type, but to behave and to act and to have your muamalat dealt like this, your attitude like this, your behavior pattern, that is the key here, and that is the real sunnah. That is when you're actually copying his sunnah. We see the Muslims today, and again, when I'm saying Muslims today, I'm talking about religious, dini, practicing people. They are in such an agitated state, subhanallah. And I thought this was in Dubai, but even coming here, I've gotten that feeling that even believing people who are, they're very reactionary. They're just ready to get back at you. Everybody's on a guard. And this is subhanallah, very, very, very different from the real character of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Ramadan is supposed to grow us. It's supposed to discipline and calm us down. It's supposed to structure us. And all of this is happening internally. Nothing is to happen externally. Because again, the concept is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Your taqwa is growing. Your consciousness is growing. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam pointed to his heart. And he says, At-taqwa ha huna. Taqwa is here. So it's inside the chest. It's inside your heart. That is what grows. You see, and in Islam, even extremely. If if you look at the successes, the success of the war and the battles and is never the overpowering of the enemy. This is my understanding of Islam. It's never been the overpowering of the enemy in a battlefield. The goal is never to overpower the enemy, take over their country. You have more land now, you have more money now, you have more resources now. That has never been Islam. Never was, never is, okay? And it was never to humiliate the people who now you have taken over. No, that becomes completely wrong. Rather, even if you look at success in battles, the goal always had been that you are given fawqiyah, you are given fatha, you're given success over the enemy to elevate them to a higher state, to elevate them to a higher state of consciousness. Because now you will teach them how to connect to Allah. You will teach them by your amal and by your qawl. You will teach them what conscious living is all about. You will teach them higher purpose of being in this dunya. So and then by that you will show them when power is placed in the hands of people, there is a responsibility. And what do you do with power? You show them by your amal. So this is what Islam came to do, even to the extreme, as I said, in terms of battlefields. And then as little as take it all the way down to your own nafs. So either which way, if you spread it out all over, Islam comes in to actually structure us, give us a discipline, and make us more aware and make us much more conscious. And again, in Islam, Ramadan is a fard ibadah. And this ibadah teaches us discipline. It teaches us to value time. It teaches us structure. It teaches, and even Salah does that. But fasting, much more than that. You know how particular we are about minute-to-minute details. We know all the timings. We're so particular. It teaches us timing and value of time and structure and discipline. In fact, all spiritual practices teach you that. And that is a sad story today, that if you see, this is the teaching of Islam. And then when you look at Islam today, and you see where we are and how far we are, and people will hold on to the cloth of qiswa, and they're crying at Kaaba, and they're crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why are we not victorious? Why doesn't Allah open doors of victory to us? Well, you know what? Today we are so far from that. Allah does not open the doors of victory for us, because look at our state. We are in a wretched state. Look at the type of Muslims we are. And I'm not talking externally, I'm talking internally. If victory does even come to Muslims at this point, we will actually destroy Islam. We will harm Islam. So it's not about Islam that we want victory. It's very individualistic. This victory comes to Muslims when they have a particular inner self, in inner strength. They have discipline. They have character. They're people of worth. A success and fatha comes to them when people have been disciplined. um if you look back, and you will see that they when they became successors and Allah gave them success, they honored Islam. They really did. If success is to given to us, we'll actually destroy Islam because of the state that we're in. If you look back to great victories, some of the greatest victories have been bloodless. When it comes to Fath Makkah, the Prophet ﷺ, 20 years of oppression, day in, day out. And he enters Makkah as a Fatih, as a conqueror, with his chin, almost touching the neck of the camel. He's so humble, and he comes in and he forgives everyone. La tasiru ba'alaik. No loss for you on this day. Nobody is a loser on this day. He's coming as a victorious person, and he's telling everybody to the city that he is overpowering, saying nobody loses anything today. Especially, and subhanallah, to the chief of the enemy, to the leader of the Quraysh at that point, Abu Sufyan, he says, whoever enters the house of Abu Sufyan is safe. You see, he honored him. He gave him izzah. To the enemies, he gave izzah. And this Abu Sufyan was someone who fought him for 20 years. And now he says, whoever enters the home of Abu Sufyan is safe. That's what I mean when I say Islam comes and these people come and they honor Islam, because their their own innate nature is so structured and disciplined. They are so aware and conscious. So it's not about reactionary. This was not reactionary behavior that, okay, yeah, 20 years later, now Allah's given me an opportunity, now see what I'm going to do with you. You made our life living hell for 20 years. Now we're going to get back. No, this is not the behavior of the people of Allah. This is not how they behave. Salahuddin Ayyubi, I'd like to mention one of his battles also. This was after the Battle of Hittin, the great victory against the Crusaders, the Battle of Hittin. And then when he came towards Jerusalem, after that, as a conqueror, they had given him titles of he's the Lion of the Muslim. So what he comes in, and the first thing he does is in Jerusalem, he gives them a general amnesty to everyone. He says, everyone take your stuff, and if you want to leave, leave. You want to stay, stay. This is the land of Islam. It's open for everyone, but if you choose to leave, leave. If you choose to stay, stay. And the first Sunday that came after the time when he had conquered, all churches were open. Life was as normal, and everybody was given the freedom to do what they choose to do. And that was, liberating Islam, because Islam comes in to give that to people. And again, why did that happen? That happened because he himself was a person of spiritual high. That is, internally he was very connected to Allah. He understood what ibadat what are they supposed to do to me. And we're talking about Crusaders when they had entered as successors in Jerusalem. They had killed very well known in, if you look at the chronicles, of even the Christian tradition, they have it even there that they'd killed over 70,000 in one day, and they picked on the ulama of the Muslims, and blood was flowing in the street. It's completely brutal. And this is what they did. And to those people, Salahuddin Ayyubi comes in and he's relaxed. Now what happens? They're not reactionary. They're not reactionary. They're not doing tit for tat. As an individualistic person, again, I'm not talking about these big people. I'm talking about how do they get there? They get there because they understand that through salat, through their ibadat, Allah is disciplining the soul, so that it doesn't become reactionary. You see, so that wala yajhal, so you don't become reactionary, you don't become foolish. You have hilm inside of you. You have control. Fasting teaches us hilm. Fasting teaches us forbearance. Fasting teaches us tolerance and control. And Muslims, subhanallah, have to go back to these states. Only then we will be successful at an individual level and at collectively as an ummah. Wallahi, I'm telling you, individually try to adopt these things into our lives. When you're fasting, it's not just about the food and the drink. It's not just about keeping away from your spouse. It's far bigger than that. It is your internal training. That's what's going on. And that is what makes a person different from level one. You see, if everybody's fasting at the level of general fasting. Everyone's, and then there are a few people who are fasting at the level 2 specific fasting. But we need to be conscious of fasting, knowing that my goal is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. I have to be much more connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I have to be much more disciplined when I come out of the state of fasting. It's supposed to make me consciously aware. It's supposed to make me consciously much more focused. And it takes time. It takes control. It takes helm. That's the training for one entire month, day in, day out, without any break. So, if you look at it that way, it's actually an element of mercy from Allah. This is how I look at it. A lot of people may not agree with me, but I think it's the mercy from Allah that the Muslims don't have power today. Really, it's a mercy from Allah that we're not successors. Just look at our state. Look at the way. Look at the state of the Muslims in, for example, they're standing in one clean, row in Salah. Can you see the state of the shoes outside? Can you see the state of the cars and the traffic jams and the parking outside? So this is our state. We're in an absolute chaos. And why we are like that? Because internally we are like that. It's all about mentally how we see things. It's all about a spiritual state. Internally, we are so chaotic. We're so frustrated. We are a mess inside, and that is when it all comes and it is manifested out. So it's actually a mercy from Allah that He hasn't made us successors, and we're not the leading nations because we are not qualified to do this. Look at the way we're running mosques. Look at the way we're running institutions. Look at the way we're running businesses. Look at the way we're trading and we're dealing finances. I mean, we need to shukr to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for not giving us power, because we'll destroy ourselves and we'll do great damage to Islam as well. And subhanallah, we need to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is a month of dua as well. And again, Ramadan is about connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rearranging a lot of things, reconnecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, adjusting the bond that we have. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِاللَّهِ. Hold on to, cling on to Allah tightly. Remember the fact of لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts it into perspective. The whole point is so that you adopt taqwa, so that you develop taqwa. You're consciously more aware. You are, spiritually much more aware. You're more present after Ramadan. And that is what Ramadan comes to do. It's an invitation for us to see where we are. Again, inshallah, and inshallah, as we move along in the next class, I think I'm going to talk about shukr, because that's another thing Ramadan comes to teach us. It teaches us gratitude. It teaches us how to do shukr. And then inshallah, we'll talk about the levels of shukr and then move to the depth of shukr, because that's another month that it is. It's a month of dua. Again, understand that dua it's the key. This is a month of dua. There's so many times during the day when your dua is accepted. The time of iftar, the time of tahajjud, after your fard salah. Make du'as, and make dua not just for your physical material self. Make du'as for your internal spiritual growth as well. Make dua for people to see things. May Allah give us as well the basira, to see things much beyond the external eye. There is the eye of the heart as well. Your heart needs to see the reality of situations. There was a dua that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught: Allahumma arini haqqal ashya'a, haqiqat al ashya'a kama hiya. Allahumma arina al haqiqat al ashya'a كما هي. Oh Allah, show me the haqiqah. Haqiqah is the reality. Show me the reality of things as they are. And it's a very beautiful dua to do. Even for people, situations, we need to see things clearly. We need to comprehend things clearly. We need to understand things clearly, not just superficially, but there's a very deep rooted essence to things that we need to understand. And you know what it'll do? It'll calm you down. This is what Ramadan has really come to do as well. The more structure you have in your life, the more discipline you'll have in your life, you will see the calmer you're going to get, the more tranquil you're going to get. And that is the kind of tranquility that literally, if you see towards the end of Ramadan, that is the tranquility that we're talking about. It's a tranquil month. It's supposed to give us that contentment. So subhanallah, may Allah give us the tawfiq of that. Inshallah, in the next class, we will continue towards shukr and other aspects of elevation in terms of our fasting. Inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grow us in our iman, in our taqwa, because the essence is of Ramadan, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. And if we're not growing in taqwa, taqwa is consciousness, being present, being aware, being structured, being disciplined. If we're not there, then we haven't really gotten much out of Ramadan, except maybe just a few more clothes or a few more dishes that we hadn't eaten before. And that's really not what Ramadan came to do. There's always the essence of ibadat that we miss. Similar was my concern when I was doing the Salah class. So much emphasis paid on the external element, but we lose track of the reason why it was given to us. It's supposed to do something internally. It's supposed to grow us internally. So again, with ibadat, all ibadat has a ruh, has an essence. And if we miss the essence, we've missed the whole thing really. We haven't taken from the ibadah what it came to teach us. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed us all with this beautiful month of Ramadan. And inshallah, we have to grow ourselves spiritually in this month. May Allah give us the tawfiq to do so, inshallah. May Allah accept it from all of us, inshallah. And I will, inshallah, continue in the next class. And I'll move on towards shukr and other elements of understanding the essence of Ramadan, inshallah ta'ala ul aziz. Jazakallahu khair for attending the class, and may Allah benefit all of us with ilm which is beneficial. Allahumma anfa'na bima 'allamtana wa 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa zidna ilma. It's a beautiful dua. Oh Allah, give me ilm which benefits, and ilm and give me ilm that is beneficial ilm, subhanAllah, because we have a lot of things that we take knowledge from and we take information from, but does everything that we take in, is it beneficial? So we want that which is beneficial to us for our deen and for our dunya. So may Allah benefit all of us from these classes as well, and may we be able to put them into our amal. May Allah accept it from all of us and give us the tawfiq to worship Him and do the ibadah with the ruh intact, and may we grow spiritually in this Ramadan. Ameen ya Rabb. Inshallah, I will see you next week, same time. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.